We flew into Italy via Frankfurt, Germany, and we crossed over the Alps on our way in. The views were spectacular and the weather was perfect. That is, until we got to Rome. But the rain wasn't going to dampen our spirits. No. Dad bought umbrellas. Just around the corner from our bed and breakfast was the Spanish Steps, so that was our first stop. Would you believe I got this little girl to pose for me? Well, I didn't. So here's another shot of the Spanish Steps. And then I ran all the way to the top, and I got a view like this. And then I waited until dark, and got this. After touring around Rome for a while, Dad found this street side stand and decided to pick up some bananas for breakfast tomorrow morning. Everybody was getting a little bit tired, except for Terry, and decided to head back to the bed and breakfast. Apparently we ended up on some of the rather prestigious streets because Terry wanted to do a little bit of window shopping. I mean, you're only going to be in Italy for a week and she wanted to see everything there was to see. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. The only thing we could afford to do was window shop on these streets.
M&M's, same in English.
It was well past noon and Terry wanted to get something to eat. And it was apparent to her that she was going to have to exercise her well-honed communication skills to place her order. After authentic Italian pizza, you have to get a cup of coffee. And where do you get a good cup of coffee in Rome? It was time to head back to the bed and breakfast, but first Terry needed a little exercise, climbing some steps. The next day brought absolutely beautiful weather, so we walked to the hotel across the street, and the doorman there was more than kind to hail us down a cab. Now we were off to see some of the sights of Rome. Apparently the news in Italy this day happened to be something about the Lady and the Tramp. Imagine this being your view on your daily commute to work. This is where Mussolini declared war on the United States. We headed down the ancient road called the Appian Way. We were on our way to see the Basilica San Sebastian. This is St. San Sebastian. Do you think it was a hunting accident? Locked doors usually don't dissuade my cousin Karen, but without her crowbar, she quit pretty easily. We then headed over to the Domitilla Catacombs to get a quick tour. It starts in a sunken 4th century church. Listen to why the catacombs came into existence.
In the surface, and the cemeteries were only pagans because of the lot of persecution.
These catacombs were started in the 4th century. They were abandoned around the 9th century, and then they were rediscovered in 1874. There's over 15 kilometers, roughly 10 miles of underground caves. Now you're going to notice that the camera work isn't so good here. There's a reason for that. They don't allow cameras down in the catacombs. That's right, I had to turn off the little red dot and the little chime on the video camera in order to even get this footage. Another problem is there's no backlighting. So any lighting that you're seeing is from the foreground. It's all incandescent lighting. So what you see is what it's really like when you're walking around in there. It's dark, it's musty, and if you can imagine being a Christian back in those days, you're working only with candlelight in a non-ventilated cavern in order to bury your persecuted Christian relatives and loved ones. Now, as if it isn't enough to dig out these catacombs and to bury their dead here, these people also decorated both the ceilings and the burial chambers. They actually painted them. One of the interesting things about the Domitilla catacomb is that this is the only catacomb in Rome in which they still have bones. All the other catacombs in Rome, the bones have been removed. No trip to Rome is complete without a trip to the Vatican. This is the balcony where the Pope addresses the crowds. This is St. Peter's Square. It's in front of St. Peter's Basilica. And St. Peter's Basilica is a basilica and not a cathedral. The difference is a cathedral will contain the seat of a bishop. The basilica does not. Note the Egyptian obelisk in the middle of the square. That was brought to Rome in the year 37 AD. It is the only obelisk in Rome that was not toppled ever since Roman times. Now here we are heading into St. Peter's Basilica. What you're looking at is the Baldacchino. It's one of the largest pieces of bronze in the world. This is Michelangelo's Pietà. St. Peter's Basilica covers 5.7 acres, and there's so much artwork in here we could spend an hour and a half just talking about each individual piece. But I will give you one interesting bit of trivia about St. Peter's Basilica. The dome is 448 feet tall, measuring from the floor to the very top of the dome. This is St. Helena. This is a functioning church and there were services taking place. This is St. Veronica. And then all of a sudden we were at the end of our tour, so we decided we'd take the next tour. So we headed over to the Sistine Chapel. Here we are heading in through the palace to get there. These are the dogs that protect the front doors. You're about to see a giant tub made of imperial porphyry, which is a purple rock with white flecks in it. That stone only comes from one quarry that's been long abandoned in the eastern desert of Egypt. You will also see 2 sarcophagi made of the exact same material. One was made for Constantine's wife, the other for his daughter. My God, it's a young Bill Clinton. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Sistine Chapel. Again, you're going to notice the camera work isn't exactly perfect. You want to know the reason for it? You probably guessed it already. That's right, no cameras are allowed in this room. So again, I had the camera by my side with the little red dot off and the little chime off, and I shot about 15 minutes of video, and this is all that was worth showing. After exiting the Sistine Chapel, you go down a series of hallways, and it puts you out into this courtyard, and then you're right back out into the square. We could have continued on with the tour and gotten the next line that you're about to see all the popes that are interred in another room, but we decided to go see more of Rome instead. And here's some obligatory pictures of the Hard Rock Cafe of Rome. The next thing on the agenda was to go see the ancient city of Rome.
Love those senators.
That's the public toilet.
No, public fountain.
We decided these guys were dressed this way just to pick up women. Tickets, get your tickets here. Today we're feeding Gentiles to the lions. Get your tickets today and today only. After touring the Colosseum, we decided to go to the top of the hill to view the ancient ruins of Rome. Then it was time to head over to the Trevi Fountain. You know, the 3 coins in the fountain thing? Well, the belief is that if you take your right hand and you throw the coins over your left shoulder, it brings you luck. Now, that guy threw it over his head, so we couldn't really figure out what he was aiming for. We also couldn't figure out what this guy was aiming for. Now, if you want to find the Pantheon, just look for the McDonald's Pantheon and the Bar Pantheon. The Pantheon will be on your left. The Pantheon was built around 125 AD, and it was built as a temple to all the Roman gods. Since the 7th century, it has been used as a Catholic church, and it is the oldest domed building in all of Rome. Two kings of Italy are also buried at the Pantheon, as well as one of the queens.
is, their best earning years are right now.
The next day it was time to hit the road and head up to Modena. Driving up through Tuscany, it took about 5.5 hours to actually get to the city. This is the official city hall of Modena. This day is February 14, Valentine's Day, and Terry has an official meeting with the mayor of Modena. Since at the time she was the mayor of Modena, I made arrangements for her to meet the mayor of a sister city. While she was waiting, I decided to film a couple of the rooms that we were sitting next to. This one is the new meeting room. This meeting room was the one used after the original meeting room. It was actually made in around the 16th century, and it is furnished as it used to be back in those times. This is the original meeting room, the old meeting room. This is from the 15th century, and it is also decorated as it was in those days. While Terry signs in, I want to tell you a little history. You're about to see a bucket. This bucket was acquired by the Modenese from the Bolognese in 1325, and a battle ensued because of that lasted 12 years, in which thousands of people lost their lives. Needless to say, the Bolognese still aren't happy about it. Terry presented a little handmade book to the mayor of Modena, and it's about Modena, Pennsylvania, and it shows the paper mill, and it shows the post office and the little city hall. She explained to him how big Modena is, of course only being 621 people. And since she really had nothing else to present him other than some paper from the sealed air plant, she gave him that Blanco bottle. In return, the mayor presented a hardbound book of Modena, a city for which he is very proud. It's 175,000 people, as opposed to Modena, which is 621. He shows her some of the highlights of how the buildings are made, what they're made of, and just basic things about the city. Again, Mayor Giorgio Pighi is very proud of his city, and he should be. It's the home of Ferrari, Pavarotti, Lamborghini, Di Tommaso, and who can forget balsamic vinegar. Terry also received a scarf emblazoned with the crest of Modena from the mayor. The mayor was very happy with the bottle because it happens to match the colors that were on that scarf, which are the colors of Modena. After some obligatory pictures with the press of the two mayors meeting, we got a tour of the rest of City Hall. The highlight of the tour was to walk out on the balcony at the front of City Hall. This is usually reserved only for the court jester or clown during the Carnival. The view from the top here is absolutely spectacular. It's looking down over the piazza of Modena. This is what it looks like from the courtyard, and listen to the explanation of what the clown or jester typically does.
Against the city hall, against the people, provocatively.
Yeah.
And all the people are here just listening to him.
After a few pictures with Mayor Pighi's secretary and the translator, we headed across the piazza to the church. This church is where Pavarotti's funeral was, which happened only a few months after our visit. Here's the front of the facade, and here's what it looks like from the inside. Now, if you notice, the camera shots are crooked again, and it's quite dark. That's because cameras aren't allowed in this church either. Now, it has a very medieval feel because those are the only windows, so it's very low on light, and they put very little in the way of incandescent lighting in this church. Oh, as a side note, you can hear people in confession, but since we didn't speak Italian, it didn't make any difference. As we walked back to our car, we took some random shots of the streets of Modena. It's a beautiful city. It's very neat and clean. We also discovered that the military academy is here. One of the things we learned is some of their lesson plan. Here's one right now. This is where the Germans run over the Italians. Heading out of town, we drove on a road called Via Modena, and about 12 miles out of Modena is a town called Santa Agata Bolognese, and that is the home to Lamborghini. Heading into the main offices, we attempted to get a tour. Unfortunately, Christina was not available to give us a tour that day. She was stuck giving tours to Germans who now own Lamborghini. But she told us to go to the museum and wait for her. She'd be down in 10 minutes. And while it's not a large museum, it is a beautiful museum just the same. That's Ferruccio Lamborghini right there. So we toured the museum and we waited anxiously for Christina to appear.
It is number 0. It is the first Lamborghini magazine. This has been issued last year for the first time. So I'm sure that you will enjoy reading it. Okay? Most welcome. It is my pleasure.
Christina is the director of communications for Lamborghini and an absolutely wonderful person. So after a fantastic meeting with her, we headed back to Rome. We stayed back in Rome overnight, and then the next day we had to get up early because it was time to go to Cassino. Our first stop when we got to Cassino was a little village called San Apollinare. That's the village where our grandfather, Dad's father, was born. Not having a hat, I improvised. Yes, I found a paper bag. That is me wearing a paper bag while we go into the mausoleum of San Apollinare. Fashion statement, don't you think? Who does this look like? Now, if you don't know my family well, you're not going to know the answer to that, so I'll tell you. It looks like my brother Randy. Now, that guy, Federico Giuseppe Di Libero, died in 1943. So I think that leaves no doubt that there is definitely a genetic linkage in this mausoleum between our family and the Di Liberos here. This is a family of Di Liberos, of which several were killed in a bombardment during World War II. After visiting most of our dead relatives, it was time to head off to the town where grandfather was born.
Right there.
Right behind the church?
No, yeah, right here. That house right there. No answer there.
And who is that, Dad?
I don't know. That's his delivery name.
Well, certainly they're expecting us. Did they not get the email? You know, we get the same welcome every house we walk in, Dad.
This isn't my Tucci.
After knocking on several Delibero doors to no avail, Dad went to the old standby. He went to visit a cousin who he's visited several times before, and in that great Italian way, she welcomed us with open arms, although not speaking any English whatsoever.
Di Cicco, sì.
Questo è mio figlio.
Tuo figlio?
Questa è moglie del mio figlio.
Accomodatevi.
Come on in.
Prego.
I'm gonna follow you.
Okay. She has to close the door.
Yeah. Su, su, su.
Ramsey and Karen's big adventure.
Ci ha trovato per caso, perché siamo andati a Roma. Che lavora a Roma. Capito, no?
She says her daughter's in Rome, the son, her husband works in Milan, and they're both in Rome.
Now, while Dad may only speak a form of pidgin Italian, he understands it very well, and it was more than enough to communicate with this lovely woman. And I gotta tell you, she was just a wonderful person. She opened her home to us, we spent time there, and Dad kind of did the communication back and forth between us. It was really, actually, a lot of fun. We also learned something very interesting. Apparently, all the other Deliberos have moved away that are any somewhat close relationship to us. She is the last one in San Apollinare.
Che posso offrire?
You want to drink something?
No. Nulla?
Mattina a Roma, adesso no.
Oh, okay.
Sì.
He said
Sta andando giù.
tomorrow's not going to rain.
good.
In fact, he said Rome this morning it rains, but this afternoon it's clear.
Oh, good.
With our visit concluded to San Apollinare, it was time to head over to Monte Cassino. In World War II, the Germans occupied Monte Cassino, that giant mountain with an abbey at the top of it. They were shelling our guys down in the valley, and we had to take that hill. The road is a series of switchbacks, and it takes about a half hour to actually get to the top, up to the abbey. The views are absolutely spectacular, and you can understand why the Germans had to have it. Not for the spectacular views, but because you could see all the way down in the valley and see any troop movements. So it was a critical area for them to occupy. The Abbey of Monte Cassino has been destroyed several times. Around 577 it was destroyed, and then it was rebuilt. And in 883, it was then burnt to the ground. There was then an earthquake in 1349 that left nothing but a few walls of the entire building, and it was rebuilt once again. The current belief is that the Nazis never occupied the Abbey of Monte Cassino, but instead, because of their relative proximity to the outside of the building, derived protection from being so close to it. At over 1,300 feet above the valley floor, it's obvious why the Nazis needed to keep Monte Cassino. From this vantage point, they could see any Allied troop movement trying to move north through the valley. They could also shell them with relative protection. During the Nazi occupation of Monte Cassino, the Abbey continued on as a functioning house of worship. After seeing all the beautiful artwork and the centuries-old architecture of this building, it's hard to believe that this building was completely decimated on February 15, 1944. It was then rebuilt over a 10-year period, financed by the Italian government. This is what it looked like that day in 1944. It still took several months to actually take Monte Cassino, and the men to make it to the top first were the Polish. There's a cemetery dedicated to those brave men located at the very top of this mountain. Over 1,000 Polish soldiers are buried in the cemetery, and most of them lost their lives in just 2 separate days. There's an inscription on the cemetery that says, "We Polish soldiers, for our freedom and yours, have given our souls to God, our bodies to the soil of Italy, and our hearts to Poland." The next day, it was time for us to say goodbye to Cassino. This is the hotel we stayed at, the Grand Hotel Pavoni. Dad's very friendly with the manager there. He's stayed there several times. And it's a beautiful older hotel, kind of circa 1960, 1970. They have a wonderful display case with World War II artifacts. I'm assuming they picked up a lot of these just off the ground after the war. But you have to wonder, is the grenade still live? This, by the way, is an old Fiat.
It's got 3 layers. You see, the first layer is very hard to work. The artist actually works in the middle layer, which is the software we're talking about. Now, let me introduce you. This is our artist, one of our famous artists.
When we first got to the city of Pompeii, we stopped in where they manufacture cameos. We had never seen it done before and found it absolutely fascinating. They're made from old conch shells. And here's what the finished product looks like. Now, my sister has always been a fan of cameos, so while she was there, she wanted to buy one for her and also get one for Mom. This is Dad and Darlene shopping for those cameos. Look at the intricate work they do to make these lamps.
The shape of the early Pompeii, completely built around the main square. So main square used to be the real center of the early town before Roman enlarging. Then Pompeii was conquered by Romans 2,200 years ago and became this size. So Pompeii in Roman times was a sort of middle-sized town, was a town of 20,000 or 15,000 people in the best times. And then probably 3,000 people were killed by this terrible eruption of a volcano in 79 AD.
Pompeii was lost due to a volcanic explosion of Vesuvius, which covered the entire city in several yards of volcanic ash. It wasn't rediscovered for another 1,700 years. Since its rediscovery in the mid-1700s, it has continued to be an archaeological site in which digs continue to this very day. In 2007, 2.5 million people came to visit and view Pompeii. The city streets of Pompeii were engineered as drains also. The stones in the middle of the street are meant for walking across as water streams down through them during the rain. While doing the archaeological digs in Pompeii, they kept discovering areas of empty pockets. They decided to pour plaster of Paris down inside those cavities to see what shapes would come out. Here it turned out it was the bodies of the people that died that were covered in the ash. The bodies disappeared, but the cavities stayed absolutely in the perfect shape of the human. Apparently somebody still lives in Pompeii. There are several resident dogs of Pompeii. They're very friendly, you can pet them, and they won't bother anybody. This, and I can't make this up, is a road sign for the local brothel. Remember, Pompeii was covered in ash in the year 79 AD. This artwork was made prior to that explosion. Look how perfect it still is today. That is a lead pipe from the plumbing in Pompeii. This is a public drinking fountain area. This is some kind of kitchen. There are grinders for the wheat to make flour, and this is a cooking area. This is a public bath area. Leaving Pompeii, it was now time to conquer Vesuvius. At 4,200 feet, it takes quite a long time to climb Vesuvius, and I make it sound like we're scaling it when you can see we're driving it. I will tell you, it gets cold up there. It's about 20 degrees colder at the top of Vesuvius than it is at the foot of the mountain, which is basically sea level. We left Vesuvius and headed for the city of Sorrento, where our ultimate destination was to get to the island of Capri. Heading down this brick-lined street, this is the only way to get down to the port in which to get on the ship and head over to Capri. And this is our next stop, the island of Capri. Disembarking the ship, Dad immediately found a tour guide to take us around the island. Yes, those roads really are that narrow, but the most frightening part is that we're driving in a Fiat limo. These are actually stairs cut into the cliff face of that mountain. I think our brother Randy actually had one of those little Cushmans that just drove by. Here's a great shot of our tour guide's chariot. These are the areas where the Germans had set up reinforcements for guns for any attacks on Italy during World War II. There's another one right there. And that, well, that's just a happening swimming pool. I had to take a picture of that. These are old restored Roman ruins. What Booby Baby means, I don't know. This area said that cameras were absolutely prohibited. Needless to say, I had to bring out the camera. To get a bird's eye view of the island of Capri, take the lift to the top of Mount Solaro. We all did it. Well, everybody but my sister Darlene, who tells me that she has a fear of heights.
Boy, I'll say.
Once at the top, we took in the views. We nicknamed this statue Steve, only to find out later that it's actually a statue of Augustus. And then we headed back down.
Ciao.
Excellent. proud of you.
Me too, actually.
I know I couldn't have.
We then discovered that the island of Capri is the home to a small clan of munchkins. What you're about to see is actual film footage of the floor of this church from the second floor balcony. We were told this is actually the Gerber mansion of Gerber baby food fame. These are not trees, they're cactus. After we boarded, I noticed a ship pulling up to the dock. It contained 2 garbage trucks. Apparently the garbage trucks come from the mainland and do the trash routes on Capri. Then they get loaded back onto the ship and brought back to the mainland of Italy to dump the trash from Capri. You can see the trucks starting their route in the lower right-hand side of the screen. Leaving Capri, we headed for our final stop on our trip. After paying our respects to the soldiers of World War II, we headed over to a drop zone just outside of Nettuno. They weren't jumping that day because of the rain, but we did decide to have lunch at the airport restaurant. Now, while there was a wedding in progress, they still waited on us in the back room, and we had a wonderful lunch. Then we packed it up, and we headed on back to Rome, because the next day we were leaving, and our big adventure was over.